we've almost taken away the opportunity for the next generation to build a platform to be successful. It's disappointing.
The budget outlined that is going to create less homes. So there's going to be less homes being built, so that will have impact on rental prices.
I don't think it's going to improve affordability and almost pushes a segment of the market to be challenging first home buyers in the same market, which is almost crowding out the people that you were actually trying to support. I don't think investors are the problem as to why we've got a housing shortage. I think they play a really important part in being able to give young people an opportunity to live where they want to. I have some concerns that we're going to miss an opportunity over the next 5 years to develop that ring of suburbs that's probably between 5 and 20 k's away from the city.
The pressures are real, and fingers crossed some logic prevails and we see things evolve. Today we've got a bonus episode. We had Michael McGowan in recently and we talked all housing policy, but we did delve into the recent changes with government policy and the broader impact that has on the industry. Here's what we had to say. So part 3, the future. Obviously we've had a recent budget announcement with recent tax changes with CGT and some impacts on negative gearing. Do you think this is going to stimulate more builds? Do you think this is going to slow it down? What's the sentiment looking like right now?
Yeah, obviously, when combined with the state budget and some of the activity that's happening in the Middle East, there's just a natural anxiety and probably a heightened level of anxiety that we're seeing in the market at the moment. When we dive into the facts, the federal Treasury's own figures talk about a reduction in housing supply as a result of these changes. So it's hard to argue that it's going to increase supply when their own figures suggest otherwise. Obviously, having new builds carved out is somewhat advantageous to the industry, and you know there is a new focus on building the supply of housing. But I think there's some flow-on effects from these changes that will mean that we see less opportunities to rent in suburbs that are established and existing. I probably would have loved to have seen the ability to knock down and rebuild and add supply and granny flats and some of that be included as creating additional supply and receiving some of the benefits, which is not included at the moment. I think from our members' point of view, there's some real disappointment in changing the goalposts, particularly around CGT. A lot of our members are set up as trusts, so they're trying to get their heads around not only building more homes, but what does their business structure look like into the future, so that they can run successful businesses and make sure that they're looking after their families and their children to come. So I have some empathy for the pressure that the federal government was under to be seen to do something, but I don't think this is going to increase supply, and I don't think it's going to improve affordability. So, almost pushes a segment of the market, which is that investor, to be challenging first home buyers in the same market, in the same areas, which is almost crowding out the people that you were actually trying to support.
Trying to champion. Yeah, look, we've seen an increase in activity through our local wealth business, obviously through property investment, and people now looking towards new construction from a yield point of view, but also now they've got negative gearing CGT benefits associated with that product. And like you said, that's sort of elbowing out first-home buyers, which in Western Australia and Australia, it's, a lot of first-home buyers do go down the construction path. Do you see that having an impact and, driving additional costs within the house and land space, in a space that, again, is very constrained?
Yeah, it has the potential to. I would like to think that a lot of our established developers, and we've probably seen it over the last 2 to 3 years, have been really socially conscious about making sure that first home buyers and owner occupiers have access to the land. They've obviously got incredibly long waiting lists for people to get access to the land, but I think it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that there is a really good balance between available rentals and stuff that investors can invest into, but also making sure that our communities also have a strong population of owner-occupiers and first-home buyers, particularly in those green fields and expansion areas, because while we can't see it at the moment, if the needle does turn and the economy does soften a little bit, they're probably the ones that, we'll start to see things like negative equity and be affected by, a lack of demand in those areas for that product. So it does have the potential to create issues. But I also do think there's a responsibility on the industry to make sure that we are looking after the people and doing that in a responsible way.
Absolutely. Look, a big narrative for the budget, and I tend to agree, affordability is super challenging for first-home buyers, and obviously we deal with them every single day. And these policies and budget changes, the narrative was, generational inequality and obviously taxing investors. But I would understand if they're taxing property, but they seem to have taken those taxes across, like you said, trusts. They've taken them across stocks, whatever it may be. So CGT is applicable. So really what we're looking at is the same playing field that we were looking at prior, just more tax applied to all asset classes. So do you think it's going to slow down investors? And second to that, are investors a problem of why we've got a housing shortage?
I don't think investors are the problem as to why we've got a housing shortage. I think they play a really important part in being able to give young people an opportunity to live where they want to, spend their 20s. Whether that is going to university and wanting to live somewhere around, Netherlands or Claremont and Subiaco, or whether it is, doing a trade and living close to a college where they're going to be spending some time. So I think they're a really important part of the market. I don't think they were creating the challenges that we have around affordability. I think we could probably look to the significant uptick in population growth as a key reason for driving that change. I don't think investors make it more expensive to build a home. So I think they probably have copped the wrath. And to your point, we've almost taken away the opportunity for the next generation to build a platform to be successful in the future. And I think that is it's disappointing.
It's a tough pill to swallow, and I don't think, and understandably, do the younger generation quite know what's been taken away from them. We have a lot of buyers that have been priced out of the market here in Western Australia from an owner-occupier point of view, so they start looking at rentvesting, and that's a way they get into the market. That's how I got into the market back in the day when I was on a minimal income, and it was a leg up that I needed. I didn't want to live in the house because it was in an area I wanted to live, so I rented and bought an area, added a bit of value, rented it out. And we're seeing a lot of that where now clients in Western Australia are looking over the fence and potentially investing in Victoria because the cycle of the market over there, it's affordable. But they've had those opportunities taken away that our parents had from a negative gearing point of view. So, it's an interesting one because it is now hurting rentvestors, and rentvestors should be celebrated just as much as a first-home buyer trying to get into the market.
Yep.
So, taking privileges away can be very challenging. So it'll be interesting to see what the long-term impacts of that are. And like you said, the budget outlined that it's going to create less homes. So there's going to be less homes being built. So that will have impacts on rental prices. I can't remember the number that they spoke. I think it was 2% or something like that.
Yeah.
On the rental price, which I can't imagine that being exactly accurate. And I'm not here to bash the budget right now, but I do have concerns that there are going to be some impacts on rental prices, which again takes money out of their pocket, the first-home buyers, to be able to save that money to be able to get into home ownership. So, the pressures are real, and fingers crossed, some logic prevails, and we see things evolve.
So, if you are building a new home, make sure there's plenty of room for your kids to be there for a little while to come.
For sure. And saying that, we're seeing a huge uptake in people building homes with granny flats at once. So that's been a product for us that's really taken off from an investor point of view because they get a really good yield, but also, migrants that move over here, and they usually come over in a whole family with, the parents and all the kids, and they're building a conventional 4x2 at the front and doing the granny flat at the same time, which is really great for unlocking housing supply. And we've got to look at things a little bit differently. So I think I guess that's been one really positive shift in the market.
Yeah, I think, the changes that the state government made about 2 years ago to, I guess, free up the opportunity to include more granny flats. I think we are going to see more, people, have the granny flat there for their kids while they're in their 20s, but then maybe even the parents move out to the granny flat once the kids start having kids. So, there's some interesting suburbs around Perth where there's some huge opportunity to do that. I have some concerns that we're going to miss an opportunity over the next 5 years to develop that ring of suburbs that's probably between 5 and 20 k's away from the city. I think there's some really large parcels of land there that have one house on them that, because of the demand for housing, we're not going to see the opportunity for developers to be able to get in there and turn that one house into 3 or 4 or some mini kind of 2 or 3 story walk up. So to be able to convert some of those large lots to have granny flats and other opportunities on there, I think is a really positive sign.
And there you have it. Thanks again to Michael McGowan for joining us and talking all things housing policy. If you'd like to hear more about the recent government changes, we do have an episode with Brad Linford, so tune in to hear what we have to say.